Welcome back, podcast fans. I'm your host, Annette Hines, and this is Parenting Impossible. We have a great topic today and a great interviewee here, Angela Todd. And I'm so excited to present you to her because this is just a topic that I have never seen before, and I was completely fascinated by it. So I'm just going to tell you that the way that she is approaching chronicling the stories of our lives and our kids' lives is fascinating. In my family, actually, it's my kid's father, my ex-husband's family. They have a book on the Hines family that goes back to like the 1600 somethings. And you know, in my kids are in there, and in looking at this book, I am really connected to what we're going to talk about today because I have two children, Elizabeth and Caroline. Elizabeth, who passed away over 10 years ago now from mitochondrial disease and who was profoundly disabled, and my Caroline, who is about to graduate from college, thinking about real interesting things that she's going to be doing in life. And so I'm not going to, let you in on our little secret of what we're going to talk about today. Angela, why don't you introduce yourself and who you are? Start with who you are professionally, and then we will lead into how you got interested in this topic.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Annette. I'm really thrilled to be here. I'm on a mission, right? So I professionally am an archivist. I left my job at Carnegie Mellon 9 years ago, maybe, or 10. And
You're going to have to stop and tell everybody what an archivist is because most of us don't know that.
Thank you for that. I needed that. So an archivist is a person who helps curate the documents that are left for history. And so, for example, the U.S. archivist has been in the news in the last year because all those certified, classified documents from the president's office are supposed to end up at the U.S. National Archives for safekeeping, and after a certain amount of time, they're made public. Right. So that's, I think, the most known example. But there are a lot of other examples. So if you go to your historical society, they have papers and photos from the big families or big events in the town. And if you have a collection of your grandma's letters up in the attic, that's your family archive.
Right. Interesting.
Do you think that covers it?
That does. Okay, so then moving forward from there, so you were leaving the university where you
yes, I worked in a science archive. And when I got there, everything was accessible through the old card catalog. So it was.
I remember those days.
I know, I miss them, but not at all.
Oh.
It was last name, comma, first, which meant you needed to know who you were looking for, and you couldn't look for, say, the women who studied bamboo or the women who did water plants. You had to know the name first. So 10 of those years I did spend working with database designers, but the whole project made me realize how fragile archives are. There's not always access. I worked in a repository of alternate resort, which means I worked in a place where if you were doing a project and your university that you worked for didn't want to keep it, or your professional group that you were in didn't want to keep it, they'd bring it to me.
Wow.
Okay. We always kept it. We were a cultural archive, which is perfect for me. I studied cultural studies. And so over the years, we accepted these collections of projects of botanists who maybe found interest in a different plant. They wrote and researched about their mentor. They started a history project. And they were wonderful. They were great projects. I'm glad they didn't get lost. Ron came, Roger came, Alan came. In 18 years, one woman came.
Yeah.
So I'm on a mission to get women and historically excluded folks into the archives. And that's where our special kids come in. And I know there's a lot of language dispute at the moment about
Sure.
special needs, medically complex, on and on. So I'm
Disability.
sorry if
Yeah.
I get somebody's thing wrong, but I think what can be lost from that is not getting the big picture about how all that different language is subject to being lost to history. So whatever
Right.
the like label that you pick, I know that we're all working on specific medical conditions, but
Hmm.
part of what gets lost by that specific focus is this kind of we're all in this together kind of umbrella.
Mm.
And that's how I feel about archives. And so, like what you told us about your family's book goes back to the 16th century, my aunt Joyce did the same thing. And when I got the book, so my son was a micro preemie. He came 16 weeks early. He
Mm.
was in the NICU for 3 months, but he's on the family history. And he was
Hmm.
maybe 10 when that came out. And I just saw his full name and his date of birth.
Hmm.
And I thought, oh crap, this doesn't say anything about therapists coming in and out of our house, figuring out who could deliver oxygen to our house.
Right.
There's so much, right, that goes on in terms of the community gathering around us, churches and employees, and, all kinds of stuff happened that will
Yes.
never make it into the genealogical platforms or history, I guess.
Hmm.
And so it really got me thinking about what kind of history is being lost to about our kids and our families. A lot of
Yeah.
women end up being the primary caretakers. One of my very best friends from college has a multiply disabled daughter, and dude walked out. It was too hard. And I don't
Yeah.
think that's uncommon, frankly. But
Nope.
there are enough of us, right, to qualify as this is a thing going on in culture. Nobody's
Right.
keeping track of it. The same woman that my best friend from college, her multiply disabled daughter, I can't remember her diagnosis. It's extremely rare. There are, 20 people on the planet or something like that. But
Hmm.
there's a shot that moms can get if they're diagnosed before they give birth, and that will never happen again.
Wow.
So my friend is in this really particular place, right? This history of medicine place where she's living through like the last generation of
Of
whatever,
that. Yes.
right? And
Yeah.
so, as moms leave the workforce, as moms do the parenting, as moms, shift their focus. I have an acquaintance whose son has cancer. She's got 5 kids. You know, there's a lot going on that's never going to get picked up by ancestry.com. There's a lot that will, right? So all our families and where we live and that sort of thing, public directories and that, a lot of our family stuff will get picked up, but our actual special needs kids may not hit the markers of getting married, graduating high school, the things that get
Right.
collected.
Right.
And so I think, we don't need one more thing to do, but I'm going to ask us to.
Or maybe for society and community as a whole to take note and to help us chronicle our struggles, our joys, and how we fit in the world.
Yeah, and it's not
That's
just
what you're
us.
that's what you're saying, right? It's how
Yes,
we fit in the world.
definitely. And the impacts that we make. I mean, we spent a lot of time being a mission family for the March of Dimes. I know I'm not alone in this category.
Hmm.
I'm
Hmm.
sure everybody watching or listening does a lot of outreach, research on their kid, and
So
the
tell us about your son. Tell us about the personal connection that you have with this topic and why that hit you so hard when you saw, the history of your family and your son's
right.
name there.
Yeah, it was really shocking. I didn't think I would ever have kids. I came to the game very, very late, and so I was thrilled. I was 39, and like I said, he came 16 weeks early. They don't know
Mm.
why.
Hmm.
The other thing that made me really think about this is, do you remember the pandemic and we were learning how to wash our hands?
Hmm.
If you've ever had a kid in the hospital, you laugh and laugh and laugh.
Yes, because we know how to do that.
And
And
it
for
made
how
me,
many minutes?
yes, and
Scrubbing
brushes
our
and
fingers
yeah,
and
get the thumb. But it capitalized on that family history moment where I saw his name in the book to think, okay, so the hand washing is like this whole other world knowledge. It's like a whole subculture that's not being captured in
yeah.
history. And another story that helps me show the point is that I have another friend who has 5 children. And I said, oh, my son has a younger sister. And I said, oh, younger sister, tracked movement, or she reached across her body, or she brought her hands to midline. I told my friend something, and she said, oh my God, what kind of milestones have I been missing all these years? Right? And it's just another way of, I thought, she has 5 kids, and I'm not going to say she doesn't know what child development is, but there's a lot that a lot of families don't need to look for or pay attention to or
Right.
mind. So there's a gap there, and I would love for people to think about it, fill it.
And so you propose to fill it um, by saving our stories and archiving our kids' journeys. So talk
Yes.
about that a little bit.
Well, one of the other things that I got, talking to the best friend from college is the impact that our kids have on other people. And so I think it's documented that siblings of special needs kids grow up to have interest in special needs causes. They're very empathetic. They have a kind of
Mhm.
patience and outlook on life that's very specific to having grown up with a special needs sibling. And that's in my family, that's in my friend from college's family. And it seems like, okay, well, they're doing something. They're not going to graduate high school, maybe, but they're contributing, they're impacting the world around them. And so we're doing them short service by not keeping track of, these things that can change kids' lives when they have a sibling with disabilities.
So how do we start doing that? I, I'm already feeling overwhelmed at the prospect, and I know that my listeners are
Yeah,
too. So,
yeah,
so talk to us about sort of getting started and the basic steps and what that looks like.
right. So it's a 4-step process for you all. And the first is to just set the intention. Just
Yeah.
decide, I'm going to keep track of this. And the second is to pick a spot. I have 2 spots actually. I have a little pile on my bureau and I have a folder on my laptop.
Yeah.
And as I go, I just slide things into the pile or into the folder. For digital stuff, I will ask you to either keep it in your Google Drive or put a copy in your Google Drive just for a backup.
Yeah, I actually lost some very key photos of my
Oh,
daughter Elizabeth that were sitting on my iPad, and my iPad died, and
oh,
it was unrecoverable because I didn't have any idea about backing them up. I just thought they'd be there forever.
yeah, I
That
have a
was
phone issue
quite a
like
few years
that.
ago.
Yeah. Well, best practices now for digital material is 3-2-1. 3 copies on 2 different media, like a flash drive, a cloud, and a whatever, CD on your laptop, whatever the third one is. And the 3-2-1. So 3 copies, 2 media, and one either outside your house or in the cloud. So for that one, it seems a little overkill, but think about a flood or a hurricane or, that kind of thing.
Sure.
So make the intention, find a spot, just gather, slide and gather. That's the third step, just as you go along,
Hmm.
step in there. And the fourth
And
step
then
is to donate.
yeah, donate. Okay.
or keep it with your family legacy. So, Annette, if you continue the work that your mother-in-law, grandmother-in-law, whoever did,
Yes. Mhm.
then you have an archive. You have a family legacy started. And I think for our kids to leave a legacy helps us parents.
Sure. Well, I can tell you how emotionally connected I am to this. I spend all my days doing work that I feel helps keep my daughter Elizabeth remembered by people,
Yeah.
to make sure that her life had meaning, and that all of the hard stuff that we went through and all of the suffering that was there is not the only thing that touched people,
Yes.
that it needs to be about the other stuff, like when we went to Disney, like when she went to the prom, like all the things that we did that were just like everybody else, you know?
Yeah.
But we didn't learn to celebrate them. That was hard. So you're trying to teach people to celebrate and connect all of those moments together. I'm sorry, did I
Yes.
miss? You said there were 4 steps, right?
Well, the fourth,
Set the
it
int
was set an intention, pick a spot, slide stuff into the spot. That's the third one. And then the fourth is keep, donate it, or
Okay.
keep it with your family or archive or whatever, family legacy.
Okay, so I wanna ask you about something kind of hard, maybe a little quirky. So, I have a few friends that scrapbook, right?
Hmm.
And I always looked at all of that stuff and was like, "Oh, Lord, I'm never going to be able to do that. That is just so much work. How am I ever gonna find the time to put all of that stuff somewhere?" I have boxes of stuff from my kids, and I don't know
Mm.
what to do with it all. It's all in one place. I slid it all into a spot, but now what? How do you go from 3 to 4? How do you go from putting it all in one place to actually making it something that, how's somebody gonna know what that picture is of?
Right. So there is a balance between collecting and weeding out.
Okay.
So if it's kids' artwork, I would photograph what is meaningful to you and then hang or use whatever else you have. So in archives, we usually have two copies of everything, or at least of imagery. A preservation copy that stays tucked away somewhere, and an access copy that you hang it on the wall or give it to researchers, or people can pass it around at a meeting or whatever. So there's always a copy that's tucked away somewhere. And in your case, if it's children's art, that would be the photograph.
Mhm.
And then the original, you can make wrapping paper, hang it on the wall, make cards out of it, whatever you deem. And I'm going to say something maybe a little controversial about scrapbooking.
Okay.
Scrapbooks are great. Historical scrapbooks are great to find in the archives. My
Mhm.
grandmother made one of all the boys that went to war in World War II. They can be
Mm.
fascinating. But the modern scrapbooking with trim and buttons and little metal doodads are really, really hard for archives because
Oh,
all that colored paper is probably not acid free, or if it is, it's just in the last 5 years. Anything metal has the possibility of rusting, so an archivist's first move through a collection is taking out all the staples and paper clips. Sometimes I've even seen straight pins holding clumps of papers together.
mhm.
So don't trouble yourself about scrapbooking. You're giving an archivist a gift by not doing it.
Yay! Angela just relieved me of the responsibility of scrapbooking all my photos and projects and things. Woo! I feel relieved.
But for the scrapbookers in the crowd, you can do it digitally, and not impact anything in your collection. Or
Mhm.
if you want to digitize the photos and use the originals in the scrapbook, have at it. Just so you have
So,
something you can keep cleanly.
yeah, um, tell us who in our community would want our family legacies. So you mentioned in step 4 to donate. So who would we donate it to?
Well, there are two ways to think about this, right? One is to find a special needs focused collection. I would
Is
love
there
to reach
such a thing?
Well, I would love to reach out to the March of Dimes and say, look, here's all my stuff, the bandanas from the walks and the presentation from the local thing about preemies, all that sort of thing.
Right.
So if you're involved with a bigger organization, they may want their portion
Okay.
and they may take more than their portion. Your local historical society probably would welcome your family archive.
Hmm.
So I also am very excited to think that all our kids are incorporated into our family legacies.
Yeah.
So that even if you're not going to do research on a particular medical issue, you find them in your community.
Hmm. I think it's just so fascinating and talking about this. It is, it's really just been a very short period of time, maybe, 50 years or so
Mm-hmm.
since the 70s, since we really had people with disabilities kind of in our communities.
Mm-hmm.
It was unusual for someone with disabilities, profound disabilities, to not be institutionalized. And we're fighting actually a big battle here in Massachusetts in one of our oldest institutions, Fernald. So much of the records of all of the people that lived there were just lost. Nobody cared about them. In fact, we don't even know where many people were buried.
Oh,
So there, and this is something that's, happened all over the country, right? Maybe
yes.
all over the world. So to be talking about this, it's a pretty new concept to be thinking about where people have contributed, where the disabled population has contributed, and not just the famous people that we can think about, like Judy Heumann, who wrote wonderful books and was,
Right.
fantastic speaker and, in the civil rights movement, but the everyday person, like your son, my daughter,
Mm-hmm.
and many families like ours, hundreds of thousands of families like ours, who, you know, just by living
Right.
contributed, right?
Right.
We changed the world, this generation.
We did. And, if you haven't seen the documentary Crip Camp, I
Oh
can't
yeah.
recommend it highly enough. It's a great use of archival footage, too. So for me as an archivist, it was a particular delight. And
I
so
thought
we
it
know
was
that,
amazing. I can't believe that they even had all of those reel to reel, movies and stuff, and that they had the foresight to chronicle what they were doing.
I think, and I don't know if it's in the description of the documentary itself, but I think there was a student film project going on, and that's how they got it. It was like a class assignment or something. The original
Amazing,
archives. I mean, the documentary
amazing.
itself had a lot of other
That's such a
fancy.
good example because, we have so many people who have done family movies and different things like that. And I think about all the experiences that my daughters had, at Perkins School for the Blind, for example, which
Mhm.
has its own very nice museum full of historical images and tools and science stuff, like I can't even tell you how fascinating it is. Sometime, if you're down in Massachusetts,
Mm.
you should make an appointment and go there if you haven't been to the Perkins School of the Blind Museum. Awesome.
I would love to. Um, so that brings up another thing I want to talk about, which is HIPAA.
Hmm.
So when I was getting my master's in a women's history program in Binghamton, I had a friend who was doing lobotomy history, and she could not get access to medical records, even though she wanted to do quantitative research, not qualitative. So she just wanted to get the numbers of lobotomy patients who were women.
Mm.
It ended up, she got access, but it was not your legal channel, your legal channel. So she befriended the holder of the papers. And, it was a long process for her because it is protected by HIPAA. And so the other thing about saving our records is that, especially, for example, my friend who now there's a shot to prevent what's happening with her child.
Right.
So there's a lot that will never be known if they're just suppressing medical records.
Right.
And so for my son and, our involvement in the March of Dimes and local prematurity movements, and our hospital was big on their NICU and all that stuff. His hospital bill, he's 20 now, so the bill is paper. It's this thick.
Right.
He was almost $1 million baby. So the
Mm-hmm.
bill is going in his archive, right? So you can see every process that we went through. And that wouldn't be available to researchers. So
Mm-hmm.
there's a way in which HIPAA is a great thing if you want privacy, but you can opt out of it.
Right. You can
And you
sign
can also
releases.
create your archive that allows you to control what you make public.
Interesting. Yeah, I never thought about that. Okay.
In fact, any archive that you give, you will have the opportunity to say, keep it private for 10 years, keep it private until I pass, or keep it private until my child passes.
Oh, that's a good thought. Yeah. So we've talked about HIPAA. We've talked about, why, I think we all know why it matters, right? Um, and Crip Camp was a perfect example of that. So
And
as we're
leaving on Crip Camp, I also want to say Judy Huneman had been working for 50 years in advocacy. We've had 50 years of agitation and movement and progress
right,
in the formal world, right? The ADA, the 504 plans, on and
mhm,
on. It's time to fold them into our history also.
yeah, I would love to see even, an exhibit about, when you go to the museum and you see an exhibit about period furniture, period
Mhm.
dishes. Well, what about period wheelchairs or
Right.
standing frames or, therapeutic methods? I mean,
Mhm.
that's fascinating to me. Now, I've lived it for 30 years, so I know what a huge change there's been in, you know, approaches to education, approaches to um, PT, OT, speech therapy, and on and
Mhm.
on. And my friends who have kids with autism would say the same. What a different approach to even ABA therapy and all of the, you know, different types of therapeutic interventions for people with autism. It's you know, I'm not sure how I don't know how that would happen, but it would be just fascinating. That would be an exhibit I would go to. I think people just don't understand the profound impact and the number 1 in 5 people in the United States, maybe even 1 in 4, depending on what studies you listen to or look at, has some sort of a disabling condition or a medical condition that's disabling. That doesn't mean that everybody looks like my daughter Elizabeth, who is a wheelchair user, blind, very profoundly intellectually disabled. There are people out there who are, working, have families of their own. I
Mhm.
mean, this is, I think, lost on many of us, right?
Definitely.
So we need to start down that path of looking at our history, but also making sure that where we are today gets journaled and chronicled as well.
And I think that will help us advocate.
Right. Yeah, true.
Because being
Okay.
invisible
So,
doesn't help our cause, you know?
and it's not just the folks with disabilities that are invisible, it's their families, their caregivers, their experiences are also lost. Um, and I find that we're paying more attention to parents and parenting disabled kids or disabled adult kids, but the sibling journey is really, really lost. It's not looked at, much at all.
It is a life changer.
It is, and it impacts both positively and negatively. You know,
Right.
there's so many kids out there who are siblings who have gone on to be doctors and psychotherapists and PTs and social workers and on and on and on. But there are many, many who suffer from anxiety, who are, who just sort of never got out of their own way, who never got launched, who, just have a lot of compounded issues. And who knows if they would have been that way otherwise, right? Um,
Right.
so there's a huge impact that this is having. And again, that generation has grown up with disability front and center, unlike our generation, where we didn't go to school with kids like my daughter
Right.
Elizabeth.
It was put away.
They were in the basement in my elementary school, and I
Mm-hmm.
never saw them. And it was kind of scary to go down there, right? So,
Yeah. So much
um,
stigma, like
so
like the physical place and what they say and our imaginations. It was a lot when we were kids.
let's kind of go back and think about, our first steps. I just want to review again that, the first thing is to just set your goal, set your intention, which I always
Mm-hmm.
talk about with planning too. So you just need to set the intention of, I want to start preserving things. I'm going to go out on a limb and say, don't beat yourself up for all the things that you don't have. Just start with what you do.
Oh yeah, no. Your collection is specific to you and your family. We just moved after 30 years in Pittsburgh. We moved to Maine. I threw away a lot of kid art. I just,
Yeah,
I wish I had taken the time to photograph every friggin' piece, but I didn't. But there's no shame in that game. You just do what you
yeah,
can and anything at all. 5 documents is better than nothing.
right, right. And don't think about collecting the perfect thing. It's
Mm-mm.
just, what is your thing? What sings to
Yeah.
you? I have a Mother's Day card from my daughter Elizabeth that, was it the only one she did? No, but I saved one of them and it's kind of, a little fallen apart, but I just love it. It's,
Yeah.
it's one Mother's Day card that she handmade, and we all know she didn't do it. It was done by her nurse or her teacher or her aide or somebody, right? But she had a hand in that.
Yeah.
And I can picture her putting things on that card and spraying the glitter and giggling away and just being so happy about it. So that's the memory for me.
Yeah.
That's why I want to save that. So you have to think about what sings to you, what's important to you.
Yeah.
Um,
Or
you talked a lot about,
If you're a grumpy New Englander like me, you want to save the hospital record with everything I went through.
well, that's a good way to chronicle what life is like in the NICU. I mean, we spent
Mhm.
3 months in the NICU as well. And, because I had a 29-week 2-pound preemie. And
Wow.
um, yeah, it was an ordeal. It was an
Yeah.
ordeal. And
And
you
so I
know,
just want to push on that a little bit because since we left the NICU, they've redone that fancy hospital's whole thing. When we were in the NICU, it was 2 big rooms ringed with incubators. And now
mhm,
every family has their own pod. Kids aren't staying longer, they have less impact on all the noise and chaos. So treatments change, and so
mhm,
outcomes change. And so the history then evaporates, right? This whole generation that had the this particular therapy
Yeah.
came out a particular way or dealt with particular things, and then it all changes. I mean, that's how history works, I guess. But yeah, thinking
I
about being
can
in the NICU.
absolutely, I totally resonate with that because same thing for us. We were in a pod of six and we lost a lot of babies in the time that we were there. A lot of babies died.
And for me, the other people's drama was very upsetting. I'm a little over empathetic or something. It's
Yes.
some personal flaw.
Well, the hard part is you would come in and you would see that the bed was empty
Yes.
and you don't know, did they get transferred? Because,
Right.
kids went up to the regular PD floor, at times. Sometimes they went home, not usually right from the NICU, and then they died, and sometimes they died.
Right.
And you're afraid to ask, but you have to ask. I found that I was
Right.
like fascinated and fixated and dreading every question.
Same. Same. And there was one little baby beside my son who nobody ever came to visit.
Mm,
Of course, she passed. The whole thing was, it was upsetting. And that's the kind of peripheral stuff that
yeah.
even if we talk about the history of disability, what you and I are talking about just evaporates into thin air.
So, more people are writing books now, and you've written, why can't I talk this morning? Okay. So, Angela, you've written a number of great articles. Have you ever thought about writing a book and chronicling your story?
I have, and I actually teach a little 6-week program for other women to get started. And so I've started with them, and it's really about saving your child's history.
Mm-hmm.
And so I've had a couple people join who said, I really want to write a book about this, and I'm just going to start it here. And I've had
Yeah.
other people join that have said, I just need to get the papers in order to make sure my child isn't forgotten. And
Mm-hmm.
so I've thought about it, but I feel like, well, I'm going to be 60 next week. And I have two, one kid is 20 and one is 17. I got a late start. So I'm thinking, well, maybe when the kids are all settled, that's never
Yeah.
going to
When
happen.
is that going to be?
Right? So
You're so hopeful for the future, Angela.
that's part of being a special needs mom, don't you think?
Yeah, truly.
You got to.
Well, listen, this has been fascinating. And before we started our recording today, I asked Angela if she would come on our Circle of Care community, which she said, oh my gosh, that sounds great.
I love
I
to.
would love for her to do a hands-on exercise with us and to, dig a little bit deeper into the four steps. I have so many questions. And I am sure that the rest of you are going to be as fascinated by this as I am. So remember, you need to join our Circle of Care if you want to take part in fun events like this. So Angela, I'm going to talk to you after the show about,
Excellent.
how we can get you booked. Thank you
Super
so much for
duper.
today. This has been just amazing and very validating. So thank you so
Oh,
much.
thank you for saying that. It's very urgent in my heart. So it's hard to always find people that are in with me?
Yeah. Let's spread the word about, some kind of chronicling of our stories. I think I'm picturing an event where we have, 150 Mother's Day cards, handmade of
Oh,
all different versions, right? Wouldn't that
yeah.
be wonderful if
Yeah.
everybody shared their cards and who made them? And, it would just be, there would be so much information in that.
Yes.
Great story.
Yes.
Okay. Well, thank you for being on the show. And I really appreciate all your time and energy and efforts in this direction.
Oh, thank you, Annette. Thank you very much. I'm delighted to have had this important conversation.
Have a great day, and I'll be talking to you soon.
Okay. Thank you.